Let us begin our tribute to Alfred T. Liliendahl on this day of the Hartland Historical Society's Fall Membership Meeting, October 7, 2018. I'm going to begin with a bio of Alfred T. Liliendahl. Alfred was born in Brooklyn, New York. He lived in New Jersey and Black Rock, Connecticut before coming to East Hartland June 25, 1936 at the age of 17. Living with his uncle and aunt, short for Sherwood, and Lillian Thompson in the rented ransomed house now owned by Carol Irwin across from Camp Alice Merritt. Uncle Sher was the captain of the Hartland Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC Camp Robinson, located on Route 20 in East Hartland. Alfred met Gert Stickney that summer, probably at the 4th of July community picnic or through mutual friends, brother and sister Bob and Betty Miller. Gert's parents were from Hartford and had rented a house for 5 summers, 1928 to 1932, from the Wrights on Route 20. Later owned by Fred Holcomb. In 1932-1933, Gert's parents bought land and had a 5-room house built on Peterson Road and is still in the family. By the end of summer of 1936, Al and Gert were a couple. The summer of 1938, Uncle Sher and Aunt Lillian had Doc Emmons build them a Cape-style house on Route 20, now owned by Pastor Evan Langalus. Summers were spent swimming, blueberry picking, working in tobacco, and planting and harvesting the garden. Alfred graduated from Gilbert High. After he completed an apprenticeship program at Pratt & Whitney, and Gert had graduated from Hartford Hospital School of Nursing, they were married on November 29, 1941, shortly after moving into the family house at 18 Peterson Road. Over the next 8 years, they had Alfred, Tom, Bill, and Peg. They then started enlarging the little house and settled into Hartland life. Alfred's life included being involved at one time or another in the Hartland's fire department, the Boy Scouts, school committee, town zoning board, and Republican Party. He was a deacon at the First Congregational Church, part of our historical society, carnivals, and the Old Man's Coffee Clutch. I would now like to introduce our speakers who will share with you memories of Al. First, let's start with Al's daughter, Peggy. Come on up, Peggy. Peggy grew up in East Hartland, leaving in 1970 when she married Earl Norman from Woodstock, Connecticut, where they run a family dairy farm to this day. Peggy will be sharing with us Hartland highlights from Al's personal diary he kept from 1936 to 1940. Imagine this. Hartland's population in 1937 was only 295 families. Since that time, 81 years later, Hartland's population is now a little over 1,200. Peggy?
When Joanne called, I was honored that you're honoring Dad in this way. I hope this isn't too repetitive for some of you who heard it at his memorial service. As she said, Dad, Alfred T. Lilienthal, arrived late at night in East Hartland, so the next day he walked up to the center with Aunt Lillian. His description of Hartland: there's a dinky general store, a tiny post office, and a church with a few houses. East Hartland is 1,225 feet above sea level. West Hartland is 1,400 feet. He always gave details. When we went to Winsted, we had to go down a hill, which is past Walnut Hill now, 2 miles that drops almost 1,000 feet. Then over a hill, 700 or 800 feet high, and then down into the Mad River Valley. There are marvelous views all around here in all directions. Sometimes you can see 20 or 30 miles. And then his description of Hartland Hollow. The big valley we go through on the way to Winsted is going to be flooded. They're building a dam to make a reservoir to supply Hartford with water. It will be 6 miles long and 40 feet deep over the road we went along today. East Hartland had a 4th of July community picnic all day at Bragg's Pond, where we met a lot of the town kids. and they shot off firecrackers almost all day. The next day, he picked his first of many quarts of blueberries, and he also mentioned picking blackberries and mushrooms. Once a month, they had a church supper at the Society Hall on Thursday nights, and he said the food was good and also plentiful. There was good entertainment afterwards. Church back in those times was only roughly the second Sunday in June to the second Sunday in September. And Dad did go to Sunday school, and he was in the choir, and he quite often took the offering. He seemed to enjoy that, but his friends went also. Of course, then in July, blueberry picking became a regular thing in East and West Hartland. He picked at Barber's, at Miller's, Peterson Road. His first friend that he wrote about in the journal was Bob Miller. A lot of you know Rob Miller, who was, I think, your fire captain, right? Okay. Anyhow, Bob lived where Hank Prussing lives now, and Bob and his sister Betty were, well, Betty had met Mom way back in 1926 when they first came and rented in Hartland. So Mom was already a friend of Betty's, and then Bob met Al, and I think between the four of them, that was a win-win for them. They spent their summers doing a lot of swimming, playing ping pong, and board games. When the summer people leave in the summer, though, it was time to go back to school, and I really don't think that was Dad's favorite place to be. He did very well in some subjects, but I know English and French were not among his favorites. Bob Hayes had the mail contract, and sometimes Russ drove the mail truck down to Granby, and Dad would go along. This was interesting to me. November 1936, Election Day. I argued myself hoarse on the bus on the way home. He had a 55-cent bet on Roosevelt. Now, Dad ended up being, as most you know, a Republican. But I think because Roosevelt was supported and started the CCC camp, that's where his uncle worked, and he was a big believer in the CCC. And he said, Connecticut voted Democrat for the first time since 1912. Good old Hartland, Democrat, 46, Republican, 112. Bob Miller and Jr., who is Tex Ransom, showed me how to develop negatives and pictures. We got a new furnace installed in November, so I believe Ransom's house must have been brand new in 36. And he also mentioned that Ransom's pond, that little tiny pond, was also dug in 36. He mentions in November, the CC boys are building a swell cabin at the top of the State Forest ski trail. And then November 16th, I try not to put any of all the history that Dad put in, but he said November 16th, Social Security Act went into effect. Jumped up to June 37, grammar school graduation in the Congregational Church. Full town turned out and filled the church. Only one kid graduated. Little brother of Junior Ransom. His name is Huckleberry. Last day of school, Mr. Hayes treated all the kids on the bus to ice cream cones. July meant blueberries, blueberries, blueberries. And if he picked for Barber's, he got 15 cents. If he picked for Miller's, he got 25. And the other times, they would take quarts down to Granby and sell them. The kids would swim at Black Waters, Bragg's Pond, Gould's Pond, and when the Girl Scouts weren't there, the Girl Scout Pond. They loved to get together. He had a good little bunch of friends, and he loved getting together with them. And they'd have their marshmallow roast, dog roast, and corn roast. They did a lot of walking, taking pictures, working on their cars, and then Thursday night, ladies' aid, church supper. It was also in the fall of '37 that they made the 2 Girl Scout ponds into one bigger pond. And he went down there a lot. He liked to see what was going on and took pictures of them and all the work that they did. And he went back, made pictures, and sold the pictures to the workers, 3 for 25 cents. September of '37, I can see the northern lights from my bedroom tonight. October '37, Mr. Parmley started woodwork on his house. I sawed and helped place floor joists and nailing the floor. I earned $1.50. From Thanksgiving, it was cold early, so Thanksgiving through December '37, the ice was good. And they did a lot of skating on Ransom's Pond and Gould's Pond and sometimes the Girl Scout Pond. And he said one night, 9 East Hartland kids, he was all excited, 9 kids got together. Bob and Russ Hayes, Junior Ransom, Bill Williams, Shirley and Polly Ransom, Ava Rady, Carolyn Cleveland, and my father. And if the ice wasn't good, then you'd go skiing. And that was quite often with Pete and Bob. And of course, Pete and Bob Peterson also did a lot of skating. And with Bert, she would come up weekends, and with Jack Barber. January 38th, Jack Barber, Bob Miller, and I went sledding on North Mountain Road. It dropped 650 feet in less than 2 miles. Sure was fun. I hate to go back up though. I don't think they had a problem. January 19th, minus 18 degrees in East Hartland. The trees were pure white in the valley from frozen vapor from the rivers. January 24th, I helped Ransoms cut 18 tons of ice. It's 15 inches thick. I have pictures of a lot of this. I brought a couple of the albums of Mom and Dad's. I'm going to put them up front here. Some of you have seen them, but a lot of that I'm talking about, there's pictures to go along with it. Anyways, the day after they cut the ice, there's terrific wind and rain. Going to school, there's 6 inches of water over the road in the hollow. Coming home, they waited a half hour for the state trucks to plow the ice cakes and debris off the road. It was almost to the floor of the bus. The New Hartford kids did not come to school because the roads had washed out. A month later, 28th, it's so cold it's below 0 all day. The bus froze up, so Mrs. Asine Peterson came to Winstead and got the East Hartland kids in their Suburban. March of '38, Jim Ransom broke ground for his house today. June 4th, Jack Barber and I printed some postcards for Hayes' store. In June of '38, Uncle Sher and Aunt Lillian bought land and had Doc Emmons build the house, which we mentioned. Evan Langley now lives with his family. Then shortly after they bought the land, he had George Ransom plow a ½ acre with the 2 horses. And he's got a picture of that, as well as Hank, I believe, has painted that scene in the elementary school. I have not had a chance to see it, so I hope to get in there sometime. Bob Hayes harrowed the garden for him. He planted 294 hills of cucumbers. That was the last I heard of the cucumbers. I never heard about him harvesting them. I often wondered if they went to Silver Lane Pickle Company. I do not know. He never mentioned them again. The next day, he spent the day planting squash. Never heard a thing about the squash. Then he bought 1,000 cauliflower plants from Welcome Jones in East Granby for $4. He planted 730 with the help of Jack Barber, Pete, and Bob Peterson. Now he mentions at least 7 times about harvesting a bushel. I harvest 100 and taking them to sell them. June 18th, Old Home Day. I ate lunch at the Society Hall, 50 cents. June 21st, Jack and I went down to see the big dam. The dam sure is a sight to see. It's a ½ mile long and 100 feet high. And they would go down at least every month or two and check the progress on the dam. If they had company, they'd take them down to the dam. June 22nd, started in tobacco for Raymond Pace with Russ Hayes and Bob Miller. 4th of July, picnic was at Gould's Pond. Everybody was there. At night, we went to Barber's, 42 skyrockets. I said, who's counting? July 12th, started working for Holcomb in shade tobacco, got $1.50 a day. August 16th, after working in tobacco all day, we moved into the new house. All moved in by 9:30 p.m. They built the house in 2 months. Labor Day weekend. The Sunday school picnic was quite often either at Babb's Beach down at Lake Congamon, or this year, because they had the new pond, Girl Scout pond, they had it down there. September 17th, 38, started raining. September 20th, 8 inches over the road in the hollow this morning, 12 inches this afternoon. Wednesday the 21st, 15 inches over the road in the hollow, 2 feet this afternoon. I walked to the store to see what was happening, if anyone knew. They said there was a hurricane coming up the Connecticut Valley. There was strong winds, so I went home cross lots because trees were coming down. Uncle Sure came and said Bragg's Pond had gone out. They spent the evening bailing out the cellar, and they played cards by candlelight. At 6:15, there was no wind, and then the wind came from the other direction. It came now from the southwest. It had been from the northeast. I can hardly wait for tomorrow to see the damage. Sounds like a guy, doesn't it? Thursday the 22nd, no school. I wonder why. So what do teenagers do? Pete and Bob and Gladys, Gordon Wright and Alfred got in Pete's old 29 Model A Ford and headed out. The Hollow River had been over the highway fence. By noon now, it was only a few feet above normal. 2/3 the way up the West Mountain, after dodging fallen trees and stones, we came to a washout that had stopped everyone else. When no one was around, we moved as many stones as possible, then Pete inched the car through. We were the first to go up or down the mountain since the storm. About 2 miles past West Hartland, a washed-out bridge forced us to turn back. We went down the new Pleasant Valley Road. At Pleasant Valley, we were stopped by another bridge out. So we went back as far as the new dam and crossed over. The workmen were trying to open the flood valves. Down to New Hartford, dodging trees and water 2 feet deep in one place. They described the mess at Gilbert and in Winsted, and they tried to get over to Riverton, but they wouldn't let them through. So they went back down to New Hartford to Avon. What a mess. Just before Simsbury, they went through deep water over the road and up to the floorboards. In Simsbury, another place, the water was too deep. That was over the road, so they went through a private estate to get around it. Simsbury was worst mess of all, and Granby wasn't any better. We got back to East Hartland safe and sound after going 110 miles through devastated country. Quote, I love this one. No living people remember anything like it, even Mr. Gaines. He would have written, he wrote a lot, and he wrote a lot more, but he wished he could have gone out and seen all the damage all over the state. But the next day he did buy 4 newspapers so he could read and see whatever they had to show. A week later, Dad bought his first car, a 1929 Chevy Coupe. 1939, January. Dam is almost done. Showed friends from Hampton. Went to the auto races on the ice at Highland Lake with Bob Russ and Ken Hayes and Art Berg. Do they still do that? Okay, don't know. February 20th, Hayes had store painted light inside. Boy, what a change from the brown. April, Gert and I went down to the hollow to see how high the water had come up from the dam. It's only 5 feet below the road now. One place where there was a road last summer is a full-size trout brook from the hurricane. April 29th, spent 3 days digging a little lily pool for Aunt Lillian. It's 14 feet in diameter by 4 feet deep. Actually, I think that was his training because he went into the CCC and he dug, what do they call it, fire holes? Well, you'll all read that soon. The Army truck brought down 12 trees from the state forest and I dug 11 holes. Uncle Sure came and helped with the last one. May 6th, spread 60 loads of manure at Peterson's. That was real work. 1939 to 1940 was the New York World's Fair. Dad managed to get down there 6 times in 39, and I know of at least once more in 1940. And when they did go in 1939, they went the same day as King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. June 14th, Dad finally graduates from Gilbert and along with Pete Peterson. June 22nd, he got his Social Security and enrolled in the CCC. 6/23, he signed up at Pratt & Whitney and took the tests. July 1st, he went to Granby to get firecrackers. Get your priorities straight here now. The 3rd, it was hot and the gang went swimming at Third Waterfalls up in Massachusetts. On the way back, we stopped at the high waterfalls in West Hartland, and I have been there. It's nice to see that people still do that. 4th of July, all swam at Black Waters, and then we went to Gould's for fireworks. Then after ringing the church bells, 5 of us went to Bird's Pond for a swim. Quote, it was a tame 4th compared to old days when they, and he did not say who they were, threw dynamite from the church. July 8th, sold my old bike to Peterson's for $6.50. It's taken me a good many miles. July 13th, I was assigned to Camp Hadley, 2101 Company in Madison, Connecticut. Waterhole, that's my word, waterhole crew. Waterhole is 24 feet by 4 feet, and I know they dug close to 20 by the time he finished there. When he had weekends off, he would go up to East Hartland. He says, boy, East Hartland sure looks good, especially the gardens I planted. And then in September, he said Uncle Sure called him at the CCC and said he'd gotten a letter from Pratt & Whitney to report on 9/27 for his physical test. October 2nd, started work at Pratt & Whitney apprenticeship program. Milt Williams started today with me also. November 2nd, saw a movie last night, 20,000 a year, with Randolph Scott, who decided to become a birdman. Went to Brainerd Field, Hartford, and took my first flying lesson today. February 1940, went to East Hartland, skiing with Petersons at Black Waters. The new road is going through just above Black Waters, and they've ruined the place. February 25th, Gert and I went to East Hartland. Snow is very deep. The banks average 5 feet and go up to 8 feet. Skied 4 hours with Pete and Bob and Oscar. Best skiing ever. So deep we skied over the snow fences. March 10th, went to East Hartland. Snow seemed even higher. Stopped and talked to Mr. Gaines for an hour, then went sliding with Petersons. March 1940, Al and Gert were both born in March. Mom beat Dad by 11 days. On her 21st birthday, Dad gave her 2 tickets for them to take an airplane ride at dusk over Hartford from Brainerd. His journal ended abruptly April 22nd, 1940. I wished I had more. I'm thankful for what I have. Thank you.
I think it's pretty neat that Al actually, I've seen the diary. So it is nice, fine little print. Every single day he went there and said what he did that day. I found that pretty amazing. For him to do that for 3 days, didn't miss a day. So there's even more than than she was able to tell us today. But truly, the pictures that you can look at will look familiar to you if you do look through them, as it tells the story along with it. So thank you, Peggy. Next, we will now hear a memory read by Scott Levan. Scott was born and raised in Hartland, where he continues to live with his wife, Amy, and his 2 children. He has served our community as a member of the East Hartland Fire Department, the Board of Finance, and presently is our 3rd selectman. Scott knew Al since childhood. After his reading of a memory from Cheryl and Arnie Nielsen, who now live in Florida, Scott will share a memory or 2 of his own. So Scott.
My wife Cheryl has known the Lilliendahl family since a little girl. She was young. Young Al were grammar and high school classmates, and both of their families were then active members of the First Church of Hartland congregation. Cheryl's parents were Hal and Bertha Groth, who moved to West Hartland in 1947. When Cheryl and I and our daughter Lisa moved to East Hartland in 1975, a close relationship developed between Gert and Al and us. Instead of Tuesday with Maury, Saturdays with Al became a routine. Al, like clockwork, would visit the post office nearly every Saturday morning, after which he would stop at our house. During those Saturday mornings together, Al would offer many useful suggestions for our ongoing house renovations. He'd then spend a couple of hours helping us with whatever house project we were presently tackling. Sometimes we'd lose track of time. The phone would ring, and it would be Gert reminding Al to hurry home for lunch. In 1986, the current project was the house roofs. On one occasion, when I was up on the roof, I became aware of Al standing behind me. Just the idea of a 68-year-old man high up on my roof was disconcerting. But it didn't seem to faze Al in that least. At one point in time, Al and I each had 9 cords of 15-foot long logs delivered to our respective homes. Saturdays with Al then alternated between his home and ours. Together we would cut, split, and stack the many cords of firewood for the winter. What an undertaking that was. Cheryl and I and our family have many cherished memories of the time spent with Gert and Al in the 35-plus years we lived in Hartland. Sometimes there were dinner dates either in our homes or at restaurants. An evening might include one of Al's slideshows, leafing through one of Gert's photo albums, or just plain chatting. There were also those yearly trips to the Bird in Hand in PA, Amish country, with the entire Lilliendahl clan. Favorite outing. And the visits to the Lilliendahls' Martha Vineyard Cottage, along with auto trips and Al's old Connecticut stomping grounds. Always there was an exchange of greenhouse cuttings and plants, along with our discussion of greenhouse operations and techniques. So, interesting story. I was because I'm gaining weight, I decided to walk around the block one day. So I walked by their house, and they had a piece of land across the street. And my house that I'm living in right now with 2 girls just is way too small. So I decided to stop in and see them, and I knocked on the door, and Al came to the door, and he goes, "Yes, what do you need?" And I says, "I'd like to talk to you about something." And he kind of intimidated me a little bit, but Gert would go, "Come on in, come talk to me, you know." So it kind of calmed me down, and I went inside. So I said to her, so what's happening? What do you want to talk about? And I says, "Well, I'm interested to know what you're going to do with your land across the street." So Al spoke up, and he goes, you're like the 40th person that's asked me to sell that. He goes, I'm not interested in selling it. I said, okay, well, if you're ever interested, please, give me a call. So then again, they started pulling out photo albums and showed me, the history of Hartland and all that stuff, which was really cool because I've never seen that. So they ended up selling me the lot, which was pretty wild. So I took the undertaking of starting to clear it, and this was in the winter time. So I'm over there burning one day, and I see this person, and it's snowing, and who's that coming down? Well, it's Al. Well, let me tell you what, it was a cold day when I was burning the brush. He comes over, no hat on, just a light jacket, and he comes over and he stands by the fire. Well, I had a chair there. So I said, please, sit in the chair. So he sits in the chair. So I'm burning the brush pile, and I see him, looking over at him. I said, are you getting cold? Nope, I'm fine. So half an hour goes by. I can see he's really getting cold now because his lips are turning blue. So I said, listen, would you like my hat? Nope. I says, okay. I said, would you like me to move closer to the fire? Move you closer? Sure. So I move him up to the fire. So finally, probably a good hour later, he goes, well, I think it's time to go home. I'm freezing. I said, well, do you need any help, walking up the lot? I don't want you to trip and fall. Nope, I can do it myself.
When was it?
This was 5 years ago.
Just 5 years ago.
Yeah, but it just amazed me how he got around and just his age and he was a great guy. But the funny thing is, when I bought the lot from him, he wanted me to make a promise that I wouldn't cut down these, I think is it chestnuts or walnuts?
Chinese chestnuts, you can cut them with my permission.
Yeah.
So I ended up actually planting the house around them. And I will always keep those because he asked me to.
Your kids will never go barefoot.
But anyways, I'm glad to know your family. I was glad to know your mom, and I was glad to know your dad. Thank you.
Jean Levin, Scott's mom, will now come up. If she's here. Here you go, come on up. Jean and Doug Levin came to Hartland in 1964, where they raised 5 children. Jean has contributed to our community through the years by serving on the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen, the Churches and Towns Angel Tree Christmas Program, and has 33 plus years on the Republican Town Committee. Alan, you must have got along well. Jean has known the Lilliendahl since 1970.
Al Lilliendahl. As Joanne mentioned, we first met Al and Gert Lilliendahl about 48 years ago. Since then, our friendship continued to grow in so many ways. Al was always a gentleman. Whenever going over to the Lilliendahl home, he would answer the door and remain standing till I sat down. Also, when leaving, the minute you stood up, Al was up on his feet till you were ready to go out the door. Again, a real gentleman and scholar. He had a dry sense of humor. He was quite involved in growing plants, flowers, and gardening. At times, he would be generous and dig me up some plants, flowers that I wanted to grow. Sometimes, when Al was off and about, Gert would dig me up some plants or flowers, our little secret. One winter, Al and Gert were going on a week-long vacation, and Al asked me to take care of their greenhouse. That was an honor in more ways than one. Thankfully, nothing happened to any of the plants, nothing frozen, everything survived, and he seemed pleased with the care of the greenhouse upon his return. Once a year, we would have a sandwich luncheon together at the Lilliendahl home. I would make an apple pie for dessert and even top it with vanilla ice cream. Many times upon stopping at their home, he would show me old photos of Hartland and talk about the history behind the pictures. a man of much Hartland knowledge. Sometimes in the summer, we would chat while sitting on the front porch about the Hartland bears and the birds that would come to their bird feeders. He was not a man of many words. Whenever Al called Doug for OMKK, the message would be, OMKK, date, time, and end with the words, that is all. In 2017, Al was transferred to Meadowbrook of Granby, where I still visited him till his passing the night of his 99th birthday on March 14, 2018. I am thankful that our paths crossed in this lifetime. Thank you for knowing your mom and dad.
Nice, Jean. Thank you. Thank you, Jean. We will now hear from Ted Jansen. Ted came to Hartland with his wife Ellen in 1963. Here they raised 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, who have all made East Hartland their home. Ted was appointed the Town of Hartland Civil Defense Director in 1968, and he continues in this capacity to this day, although it is now called Emergency Management Director. Ted joined the East Hartland Fire Department in 1972, and he still serves today. His first recollections of Al are from community events, town meetings, and conversations regarding the fire department, as Al had left the department before Ted had joined. He also shared meals with him when they both worked the same shift at Hamilton Standard in the 1980s. Ted? I do have to make the comment that I personally did not know Al myself or Gert, so I'm learning a lot of nice things.
Okay, thank you, Joanne.
All right, Ted, come on around.
Okay, yes. I should say that as I joined the fire department in '72, but Al was very instrumental in the beginning of the fire department. I did bring some records here. It does say that there was a group of men in East Hartland that decided to start a fire department. Well, why did they decide to start a fire department? Well, in 1946, and it was Doc Emmons's factory, wood factory, I guess, across the street from the current fire department. They had a severe fire, and that was March of '46. Again, I'm a newcomer, so I'm looking at all this stuff at old records. So in '46, March of '46, they did have that severe fire. East Hartland did not have a fire department. So the local fire department at that time was Lost Acres in Granby, and we had one in Simsbury also. They were called, but of course they got there probably 45 minutes or an hour later, and the building was completely destroyed. So the next month, in April of '46, according to the records, there was a meeting at Society Hall. And there was a group of men that had decided that it's about time that we maybe start a fire department in East Hartland. So a group was formed, and they put a list of folks together. I think Al was on the top. He was the first guy that signed this list. And there was about, I guess, about 25 folks in East Hartland that did sign up, deciding to start the fire department. That was in April of '46. I'm starting to see records in about June of '46, where they were starting to talk about what we do to start a fire department. No equipment, lots of interest, but no equipment. No buildings, no fire trucks, no hose, no nozzles.
No money.
No money. But these folks decided that it's about time to start a fire department. So, according to the records, they picked Kleinholz, Dr. Kleinholz, to be the president of this group, and the clerk was Jim Ransom. I see records that Jim Ransom has been keeping notes of what the meetings were, and they did meet for 2 or 3 months, and then and Jim Ransom kept some records in old school composition books. the ones we used to use in school, remember? Write our little essays. And so Jim Ransom was a clerk, they called him at the time. And they were going to meet for a few months and then decided in October of '46 that they would organize. So they picked a president, a chief, assistant chief, a few other offices were filled, and Al was picked as the secretary. And Al decided that these composition books aren't any good anymore. So Al put together a real secretary's record book. And that's, when I became secretary of the department, I started looking at all these documents, and I see that Al did not like these pencil-written minutes in composition books. So he actually rewrote all these minutes for about a year's worth into this composition books in ink. Composition books were usually in pencil. So when you look at this record, you'll see that for the first, I guess it's about 4 to 6 months, you'll see that Al has rewritten Jim Ransom's notes in this book in ink, saying that it was transcribed from the other composition book. Signed, Al Lilliendahl, secretary. So Al continued to be secretary for about, well, until 1955, according to the records I see. And then it was taken over by Jerry DeForest. Al became instrumental in other things, like he was on committees and so forth. And according to the attendance records and so forth, I guess he was active up until about '63. And then I don't see any more attendance records for Al. But he continued to be interested in the fire department, because we talked, as was mentioned, I at one time was on shift, and I met him in the cafeteria, and we talked about a lot of activities during that time. And so Al was gone in about '63, and I only started in '72. So a lot of this information gleaned from these records that Al Liliendahl himself kept in ink. Okay, that's about it. Thank you very much for me sharing a few words about the activity of, and his instrumental activity in the fire department. And it grew to be the fire department that is now, you know, very stable and funded correctly, as was brought out, because that's a tough job, and keeping on top with all the equipment and so forth. Thank you.
I think you'll see that Hartland's all about volunteerism. They're a great community. I am going to tell you a word from Betty Hilbrecht. Bob and I came to East Hartland in 1981 with our 3 children after Bob accepted a position in West Hartford. Bob served on the Hartland Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. I served as the town clerk for 12 years on the Board of Recreation, and I continue to work for the town at election time. And they now reside in West Hartland. This is Betty and William Hilbrecht. Excuse me, Bob. Bob and I met Alan Gert shortly after moving to Peterson Road in East Hartland. We were blessed to have them as neighbors. They welcomed us with love and fellowship. They shared helpful hints we could use in the garden and gave us vegetables from theirs. We especially enjoyed the rhubarb. At the town hall, where Betty worked, Al used to love to share stories of his past with us. God bless the memory of Al and Gert. Our next speaker is going to be Wade Cole. Wade was born and raised in West Hartland. He became involved in the town highway department in 1975, becoming road foreman around 1991, and continues working with the highway department today, along with being our first selectman since 2003. Wayne has known Al as long as he can remember. Thanks, Wade.
I've known Al quite a while. And one thing I noticed is when Joanne's talking about all the volunteers in town here and all they do for it, it's amazing the number of people that do things you never even know about. Al was one of those people. When we were at the town hall, he used to always like to know what was going on in town. He would stop in the town hall and ask information, what's going on in town. He was very curious. One time we were working on the dam project at the Girl Scout camp, and we had a problem with the state had, summoned us for having a violation at the dam. Well, Al came in one day and he's looking and said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "The dam down at Camp House Merritt." And he says, "We gotta get some engineering done on it." And he said, "Would you like some pictures of it?" I said, "Some pictures of it?" He said, "Yeah, that's got a concrete core in it." You know that, right? I said, I had no idea it had a concrete core. The next day, up come a bunch of pictures out of a box, concrete core in it. He's got pictures. This is Mr. Ron Carey, and it might have been Doc Emmons. I'm not sure which one it was, but one of the old timers there with their truck putting the dam up. He had pictures of them building the dam at the Girl Scout camp. And when our engineers came out, we said it's got a concrete core, and they said, well, it's probably shot and stuff like that. So we showed him the pictures of that, and he said, boy, it looks like it's pretty well built. He said, we've got to find out where it is. But his pictures were so good. He had all landmarks in there. We went out with the backhoe, and the engineer said, well, I think it's over here. And I said, if you look at the pictures, it looks like it's right here. We took the backhoe, went down 6 inches. There was the concrete thing. Dug it up in perfect shape. Can't tell you how many times he helped us out. After that, anytime we're doing a project, I don't know if you heard about these things from the old man's coffee clutch or what, but he was always in there, do you need some pictures? And he brought pictures after pictures. Also, anytime we needed help trimming bushes or something like down the hall, he'd tell us how to do it. I don't know how many times he took us down to his greenhouse and got us some plants for around the buildings and stuff like that. And that was the way he helped the town. And the things that I remember about him, when you talked about it, Gert being just 11 days older, I remember, I think it was their 92nd birthday, Old Age was had a thing there. And he said, yep, Gert robbed the cradle. Good. Hit him on the arm and says, actually, he says, I'm only a couple days older. And he smiled with the biggest smile you ever saw and said, yep, robbed the cradle. So, and the other really fond memory I have him with the firemen with the fireworks they put on. I had to be 90 years old, and I remember the little kids watching the fireworks. And here comes Al and Gert, where I sit there holding hands watching the fireworks. That'll ever be ingrained in my mind. So, wonderful people for the town. Thank you.
Okay, this next memory is going to be read by Kip Metzer, as you've heard. Kip is one of our newer members who has stepped up to fill the shoes of Paula Seppi, who we lost in February. He is now the Hartland Historical Society's chair for our website and the maintenance at the Gaylord House, along with whatever else he can offer, and we couldn't be happier. Kip and Robin have been in West Hartland since 1986, where they raised their 4 children. He will be reading in a memory from Jim Grant. Jim lives in Winstead. He joined the post office in 1991 and has been a full-time mail carrier for the East Hartland Post Office since 1995.
I think it looks the same. With each passing year, people come in and out of our lives, leaving a memorable impression. One such gentle, unassuming man who used to visit our post office on a regular basis was Al Lilliendahl, the storyteller. From his vast worldly experiences of life, learning something new every time he stood at the counter was Al's gift to us. Whether describing his childhood in Lower Manhattan through the Great Depression, by taking exotic adventures overseas in other countries, he captivated our attention with a plethora of knowledge, facts, and intrigue. As the years went by, I could sense that Al's energy level in his storytelling was slowing down. One day, I noticed him pause while he was speaking, trying to remember the point he was making. That's when I walked up to him and said, Al, would you like a piece of chocolate candy? As a slight grin appeared on his face, he extended his hand out politely. And after consuming the candy with a soft-spoken thank you, Al remarkably could continue his collective thoughts, once again, painting a vivid picture of life in American from days gone by. Al, I noticed, had quite a sweet tooth. And sometimes, after that day, I think he came in just for the candy. But whatever the reason, we were always grateful to see Al pay us a visit. For when Al walked out the door, we were all a little more smarter and wiser. We miss our customer, Al. Jim Grant.
Okay. In this next memory, as I should say, will be read by Lynn Osborne. So if Lynn would like to come up. Lynn has lived in Hartland since marrying Chuck in 1981. There they raised 2 children, and she was a room mom when they attended school. She was a member and officer in the Hartland Women's Club until its ending, and played for many years on Hartland's women's softball team. She joined the Hartland Historical Society in 1985 and continues to support us to this day. First as social chair, then oral history committee for many years, always a part of our Santa breakfast and memorial and carnival parades. She served a term as president and docent chair of 2008 until 2017 when she retired. She now splits her time between Hartland and Florida. This memory is from Debbie Washington, who moved to East Hartland in 1960 when she started 2nd grade at the Hartland Elementary School. That year was her first indirect encounter with the Lilliendahl family when she was in the Bicentennial Talent Contest and rode on a float as one of the princesses who competed along with the king. That would be Al Liliendahl's son, Al, and the queen, Jeannie Austin, her piano teacher, both seniors in high school. Debbie Washington moved from East Hartland in 1975 when she married and now resides in Barkhamsted. She worked at the East Hartland Post Office as clerk in 1980, served a couple of years as officer in charge there, and finished out her career as postmaster from 1996 to 2014, serving her entire postal career in the town she grew up. So Lynn will read that memory now.
Among my fond memories of working at the East Hartland Post Office would be the regulars. We had a couple of people who we could count on to show up to the counter every day and linger with us. Al Liliendahl was one of those. His visit was so routine that Gert called the post office to catch him a couple of times before he drove off the hill to add something to his to-do list, or if she needed him to come back for some reason. We always looked forward to Al's daily visit. There were never-ending topics of interest to discuss with him. We learned that this man was well-experienced and knowledgeable in many different aspects of life. We heard tales of his travels to Australia and other parts of the world. He spoke of such varied topics as his career accomplishments, of gardening, local history, and current events too. We knew he collected stamps, and when we sold them to him, had to make sure they were in perfect condition and carefully handled as minimally as possible and gingerly placed in glassine envelopes. Knowing the wisdom this man possessed about life in general, he soon became our source of knowledge. When he wasn't around and a topic came up about gardening or stamp collecting or the history of Hartland or countless other topics that produced questions, we often said, "Let's ask Al." And we would save that question for the next morning when he faithfully showed up. It became a regular mantra with us. Most times he had an answer for us. He was our local Google search before that became commonplace. We enjoyed his anecdotes, sense of humor, and appreciated his wisdom. If he didn't show up on a day, we knew something was wrong. Otherwise, even a foot of snow wouldn't keep him away. We looked forward to Al's visits and appreciated his sage advice. I will always remember him standing, leaning on a counter, and sharing his bits of wisdom, often peppered with humor. He lived a long and full life, and we appreciated that he shared it with us. May God bless his soul and his family. I remember Al and Gert. I was not here for Hartland's bicentennial, and he was kind enough to show his slides and talk to the Historical Society about it. And I'll never forget that, because he would be there and Gert was right beside him. If he forgot something, she would know what it was. They were such an awesome twosome. They were wonderful people.
Okay, so here is where we will end our tribute to Al for the moment with just a few more items. In 1988, Al donated trees and bushes to support the renovation of the Gaylord House at its opening in 1989. They stand today as a testament to his love of gardening. Now, I know that he had given a boxwoods and a couple of trees and rhododendrons. I'm not sure, I saw some of them there today. I haven't totally taken inventory, but truly, he does still stand at the Gaylord House Museum also. The Hartland Historical Society has purchased a brick in memory of Al and Gert Lilliendahl for their support of the Hartland Historical Society through the years. This brick will be placed in the Gaylord House pathway, which I'm sure you're all familiar with if you've been over there. And finally, how could we not end the day with a story from Al? Kip has put together a short clip of Al talking about the flood of '55. I have chills. No more than about 5 minutes or so. And we would love it if you would stay seated and enjoy. Once over, please help yourself to refreshments, chatter, and check out the items on the sales table. Also, the Gaylord House is open today until 4 if you would like to visit. So, to this ending, I would like to say thank you for coming, and thank you to all of those who support the Hartland Historical Society through membership, donations, and volunteering. All the best to all of you. And here's Al.
This is from the Hartland Historical Society meeting, May 1988. And it's Al giving I got about 5 minutes of clips of Al showing some slides and so forth.
Taken back in
This is going automatically.
1955.
Standing in the way.
All right. Of the 55 flood, which didn't affect Hartland directly, but indirectly we were kind of devastated because we couldn't get out of town for the better part of a week in most cases.
And your name is Al Liliendahl.
I am Al Lilliendahl, and I've lived in Hartland since 1936.
Thank
We
you.
will now proceed with the few slides I brought. Yes, I can't.
There we go.
Hey, beauty.
If I did that, and I also skipped over to, this is as far as we could go toward Winston on Old Route 20. This is down at the corner, just as you get to the river there, just looking down toward Riverton there. The water had been up over this highway fence here, and as you can see, it left a lot of debris there.
Yeah, I think below.
The water had already gone down a lot, but there was still plenty of water around. Somebody thought he left his car in a safe place. This is down in Pleasant Valley. The bridge is down around the corner there. Oh. This is the water coming over the spillway that I talked about. It was very impressive, and it was roaring. And this is the spillway. It used to be a stone bridge across down the bottom here, but that went out.
Took that right out.
The flow of the water is too much for it.
Who's that child? Our Bill. Oh my gosh.
road was like.
Yeah, that's possible
Oh, shit.
before. Now that's where Bill went off.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He went off right here and went down the river there.
Oh,
But it was a lot more water than you see there. But I want to give you a little build-up to it. We were in Cuba with the family when it wasn't a very big hurricane was forming in that area. And as it went on the one end of Cuba, we took off from the other end, flew up to Florida. The next day, the storm was almost up to Florida, but in the meantime, we moved up to northern Florida. This happened. We got back to Hartland, and it caught us. If we had delayed one day coming home, we wouldn't have gotten home for another week. And that was a very peculiar storm in that it was only, the entire heavy rain was only about 50 miles wide. In fact, about the center, 25 miles or so, was the most intense part of the storm. But it was about 1,000 miles long. It started down, I think it was in Western Virginia, went up across New England, went out to sea just above Boston, I think. But people who lived on either side of it didn't know what we were talking about. And people that lived inside it couldn't tell what we were talking about. They couldn't get the word out. But it made a lot of people happy that they lived on a hilltop.
I do remember the fire department came around and pumped out almost everyone's basement, more than once for a lot of places.
The National Guard, after they could get into town, set up a post on the green here. They wouldn't let anyone that lived beyond East Hartland past that point for quite a while. They actually camped right on the green. They had tents there and everything, as I recall.
What was the name of this hurricane?
Diane.
Is that right?
I don't think we had any.
That's right.
There was practically no wind with the storm up here at all, was there?
No, not too much.
It was plenty down in the valley.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a real
Yeah, it was
bigger like
windy
some of them.
hurricane, a lot of rain.
It was the rain.
Yeah, that's another thing that people don't realize. There had been another low-grade hurricane that had dumped about 10 inches of rain just a week before. And then this one came along, I think it was an additional 12 inches. And that all fell in less than 24 hours, both storms. So that when we left for Cuba about 2 weeks before, we went across the Seville Dam, and at that time, the level of the water in the reservoir was about 4 feet below the spillway. When we went down there after the storm, it was at least 4 or 5 feet over the spillway, and it was unbelievable rush of water going down through it. I've never seen anything like it.
Something let loose in the middle of the night. It came right through and took out houses and cars. Swept it right off.
It wasn't the railroad trestle?
No, it was up above. But by the time we got out of the house, it was up to here on me. In about a half an hour. No. Well, yeah, but we had flood in the road. But this all of a sudden, we had a puppy. And a puppy was flooded in.
He's gonna come up. I did not realize that he wanted to get up and say a few words about it.
You asked me.
I did.
I was hoping it.
I did.
My wife reminded me.
So you either can just even turn right around.
No, I
You'd like to be up there? Very good. Thank you, Gooby.
I can't tell my lies without facing the people. My stories don't have a lot of continuity to them, just a few. humorous little facts, and as I recall them, but that doesn't testify to their truthfulness. Whenever I'm telling stories about people, one thing I try to do is think of anywhere I ever went with any of these people. The only place I could ever remember going with Al, I was on the bicentennial committee, parade committee, and we had to go down to Savage and Hartford to select and buy the trophies for the parade. And Al headed up the carload of people, went down there. We spent an hour or two down there looking over different trophies and made our choices. And we all know Al was a great camera bug. Any newsworthy event or anything going on, he was always around there with his camera. That's why he had a priceless collection of 16mm slides. I'm sure there's no one that's ever seen all of them. I haven't, but any I've ever seen were very impressive. Now I know this story is about Al, but my father comes into it a couple times. My father got old when we brought him home from the nursing home for the last 5 months of his life, and his head wasn't too great. And we'd go in the morning and ask him, who came to visit you today? One day we asked him who came to visit, and he said, well, Lilliendahl drove in with his horse and buggy and brought me some cookies. He had an imagination that worked good anyway. Peg referred to the water holes a couple times. For those of you that don't know, and probably most of you don't, on all these dirt roads around town that were built by the CC camp, they have these fire suppression water holes that are about 4 feet deep, as Peg said, 24 feet in diameter, and they were all constructed by the CC camp. Al belonged to the CC camp, and I've heard him tell this story more than once. They were working on one up on Pell Road. They had a big pile of brush. Well, they wanted to get rid of the pile of brush, so they put a stick of dynamite under it. Well, all that did was spread the brush around where it came from. Not very productive. Let's see. Oh, Al was a great builder of birdhouses. I did not always agree with his architecture, but his birdhouses always called in the birds. Al always liked as Bill said at his father's funeral, that the parents were very frugal. I'll quote Bill here. If I'm wrong, Bill, you can correct me. But you said they had a turkey. By the time they got done, the bones would blow away. Al always liked a good deal out of anything, and he believed in getting his money's worth. And so my father gave him the nickname Pitch Penny. So anyway, Al and Kurt made 2 trips to Alaska, motor trips. The first one was in a Volkswagen bus. And if I recall, they went 12,000 miles in 6 weeks. And that's a lot of time in a Volkswagen bus whose top speed is maybe 50, 55 miles an hour. And I remember Gert complaining he wouldn't even stop to let her go to the bathroom. And all he had in his mind was, get there, quick. Let's see. On his first trip, so anyway, on his first trip, they had this Volkswagen bus, which was obviously very economical to run. His next trip, I guess he got sick of the Volkswagen with no speed, no power. His next trip, he went for a high-speed Chevrolet motorhome with a 427 V8, which was a hot rod of motorhomes. Now it's probably the other extreme. I'm sure the gas mileage killed him. He kept it quite a while, used it, I guess, and he ended up selling that with a Jerry Burrell, and beyond that, I don't know what happened to it, but he was very happy with the performance. And Al was a very avid gardener. He liked to have a good garden. Well, the people at the house at 7 Hartland Boulevard, the name was Austin. Austin's had a big flock of goats, and they used to produce goat milk, and Mr. Austin would take it to work periodically. I mean, I don't know if he did it every day, but they supplied it to St. Francis Hospital, because goat milk is easy to digest, I guess, and they had a demand for it. Well, the Austin boys told me that he got in trouble after a while because he didn't have the proper, but he did it for quite a while anyway. In the meantime, Austin's had accumulated this large pile of barnyard fertilizer from the goats. Well, Al saw a chance here to get some good cheap fertilizer and made it, I think it was after the house was sold to the next owner, Al started hauling this barnyard fertilizer home in his old homemade cut-off pickup truck 2 or 3 times a day, go flying up the road, a few minutes flying down the road all summer long, at least for 1 year. He had a good garden, and I think the soil was probably still very fertile there. That's about all I've got to say. These are just random thoughts, and as I said, to the best of my knowledge, they were told to me mostly.
Question I'd ask, so what year did you come to Hartland? Actually, Yubi is one of the, from the early ancestors of Hartland,
Did
right?
I come to Hartland?
Yeah, what year did you come into Hartland?
1937.
1930, so you were right here when he was here too.
Yeah.
He's one of the
You were right here.
295 people that were here.
I thought he was mentioned, I thought I read somewhere, so-and-so, and I thought it was Parley, had a son today, and it, but.
Well, that had been me, because
It
my
would've been you.
father was born in 1925 in West Granby. So if that's in your literature, I'm part of it.
I have one other question, because I have you. The black, what do they call it?
Black waters.
The black waters. So literally that's not in existence anymore because it's been,
Well,
when they
that's
put in
not,
20?
no, apparently.
There's some beautiful picture of it, that's why I question.
Apparently, I've been thinking wrong all the time. It's down in the North Hollow, and I thought it was up toward Granville, because there is a deep water swimming hole up there.
Right,
But
that's my-
according to what they said, that Al made a comment that it was no longer existed, so I think it was right there where the road goes over the river.
Yeah,
Because,
I think it's
favorite water
swampland now.
Yeah,
or
it's
something.
right there where the road goes over the river now. There's really a bridge there. You can't see it, but you're going over a bridge when you go across
When you're
there.
actually going to that
I
spot.
remember the fishing used to be good. Russell Hayes would drop me off on the, come on the bus, and we'd go fishing under that bridge. He'd pick us up on the way back.
There you go. All right, thank you. Please enjoy some coffee, cider, and some donuts from Mrs. Murphy's. Mrs. Murphy. Thank you all.